He has written this book, and there will be books for sale at the end of his talk. We have a table set up over here, green cover on the table, $15 for each book, and then if you bring it back up to Bob, he will be happy to sign it for you. Let me give you a little, oh, and I also want to make sure that I say a big thank you to Sarah Kaplan, who is out in the kitchen. This is truly magical, that she did all of this. I don't know how, but it's incredible, and she just kind of put it together. So thank you very, very much, Sarah. Because we just finished Passover, I will say a few things about Bob and punctuate them with Diana. He founded his own company, Diana. He also founded the Max Foundation at Ohio University, Diana. He's a past president of the Jewish Historical Society. Diana. He brought about a merger of Jewish communities that essentially created Metro West as we know it. Diana. He is the founder of this congregation. Diana. He has served for more than 60 years as a Jewish community leader in this area. And he has written a book, Diana. And I think that one of the most incredible things as we were trying to figure out this date, it was not an easy task to find a date when he could be here, because Bob speaks in many, many places, and we had some back and forth to come up with the date. But he noted that it was National Former POW Recognition Day, which is an interesting coincidence, but important for you kids to understand that he was not a POW. His experience was different than a prisoner of war. And just so that you're aware, the Geneva Convention says that prisoners of war must be treated humanely, given adequate food, clothing, housing, and medical attention, allowed to communicate regularly with relatives and receive packages. And they must be paid for work that they do and not forced to do work that is dangerous or unhealthy. As you will learn, Bob was not a prisoner of war. And now, I'm going to turn this over to Rabbi. Thank you.
Get off my glasses. So, for some of you, Bob Max needs no introduction. Because Bob and Shirley were the founders of this synagogue, and Bob has been president of CBH and has been intimately involved in all aspects of the life of this community. And when I came to New Jersey almost 4 years ago, I thought of Bob and Shirley Max as the heart and soul of this community. But we have many new members, and we have guests here today who don't know Bob at all, or don't know Bob as well as some of you. And some of you never had the joy of knowing Shirley. And some of you have not had the opportunity yet to hear Bob's story. So I'm very pleased that Bob has agreed to speak to us this morning. Bob has a very busy schedule with many, many commitments. So I want to thank you for fitting us in. In addition to everything that Bob has done to build CBH, as you just heard from Cindy, he has contributed his talents in many ways to the wider Jewish community. Bob has had an impressive career and continues to be a valuable member of the greater Metro West Jewish community, even into his 90s. But I think he would agree, I hope you'll agree, Bob, that his most important work has been sharing the story of his experiences during World War II. I first heard Bob tell his story when Don and I came to New Jersey to look for an apartment, and we dropped in on Friday night services, and we're fortunate to come on a night when Bob was speaking. Since then, I've heard Bob speak at Montclair State University, and I've read his book, and each time I hear the story, I learn new things. So I'm looking forward to learning more new things today. What I've learned most of all is about Bob's courage and resilience and his commitment to Judaism and his Jewish identity. I know that Bob is especially interested in telling his story to young people so that they will understand the horrors of Nazi Germany and commit themselves to work toward a world where such mistreatment of human beings never happens again. So I'm very glad that we have many of our confirmation students and some religious school students here today. I have the greatest respect and admiration for Bob Max, and I am proud to count him among my congregants, and most of all, I am honored to call him my friend. So, Bob.
That brief walk up here, until a few years ago, was really not indicative of my ability to continue to move comfortably, gracefully, etc. And I mention that just as an aside, that at the age of 64, I decided I wanted to run, and I wanted to run in the Senior Olympics. And I trained. I had no trainer. I knew I was going to enter in the 50-meter and the 100-meter dash. 50-meter dashes all start because after you take off, you're there already. And so I practiced. I went to Summit High School. I went to their track, and I practiced. And I had a good start. And surely enough, when that gun went off, I burst right out of there, and I won. I got a gold medal for the 50-meter dash. Didn't do so well in the 100. I took a second, a silver medal. At any rate, I'm grateful to be as mobile as I am. I can tell you I will be 95 years old in July. And I think I still have my faculties. You'll tell me in a little while whether I do or not. But and I appreciate the introductions, Cindy, Rabbi, so much. And I reflect when I hear that on the things that Shirley and I did. And when I say Shirley and I, just as an introduction, I just want to say something about Shirley because so many of you do remember Shirley and I. And we formed a team in the Jewish community. We functioned pretty much as a team. We're idealistic in terms of Jewish affairs. And when we did marry, we set off on similar courses. I will get to the details on that in a little while. But part of this aside, I want to tell you how I met her. When I came back from World War II, I had decided, while I was recovering in hospitals overseas, I had determined that I was not going to go back to the university I had attended my first 2 years. It was Ohio University. Somehow, the idea of Cornell University just came into my mind. And for some reason, people have asked, I have no idea why. Why did you want to go to Cornell University? I did want to go. And I believe because I was also a musician at the time, maybe their theme song, Far Above Cayuga's Waters, that song seemed to attract me. And I said, that's where I'm going. As I crossed the Atlantic, though, in a hospital plane, I was looking out, gazing out from the hospital bed, gazing out the window, and something, it was like a voice came to me and said, Bob, you're not going back to Ohio University. You're not going to you're not going there. You're going back to Ohio University. And when I got there, I came back. It was after the war. I was living in a rooming house before we started our fraternity again. And I walked out one day, and a couple of people come up to me and said, "Are you Robert Max?" I said, "Yeah." Would you come with us? Why? Where am I going? We're going to the Hillel House. And I said, why, what is Hillel, and why do I want to go there? And they told me that, well, you have to go there because we've just elected you president. Why did they do that? While I was recovering in the hospital here in America, I was interviewed by Stan Lomax, who was the outstanding radio man at the time. And that interview was picked up in Athens, Ohio, at the Hillel House. Saturday afternoon, students were sitting around, and somebody called the attention of the others, said, "I just heard somebody being interviewed, and he mentioned Ohio University." And so they all tuned in. Thus, when I did decide to go back to Ohio University, they knew the name, and they were looking for me. It was the annual meeting, and they were having elections, and somebody, I never did find out who, introduced my name to become president. That's where I was going. I tell you that for two reasons. Number one, it was an indication of the times. We were a very, very different America than we are and have been for a long, long time. And everybody wanted roles in the war effort, on the home front or overseas. And the war remained, we can use the expression, popular. So, for that reason, they recognized me as a hero. Everyone who came back was a hero. And sight unseen, as I said, I became president. They ushered me into the home and into a room where there was a big table, lots of papers on it. And there was a young lady standing behind those papers. And I said, "I'm Bob Max." She said, "I'm Shirley Miller." Shirley. I said, "Shirley, tell me something. I understand I've just been elected president of this organization, but I know nothing about Hillel. I've never led an organization. Would you help me?" And those of you who remember Shirley, her face lit up, and so with great confidence, she just looked, and she just nodded, of course. And that began the association of the two of us. It lasted for 67 years. And virtually all of those years, we functioned together in the Jewish world, as was mentioned, the rabbi mentioned it, and it was just about as perfect a marriage as there could be. And I offer that just as an interlude to what I want to talk further with you about. You recall, the Japanese Air Force struck Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands in December 7, 1941. The islands were territories of the United States. Later, Hawaii became our 59th state. But here we were in war. We weren't really prepared for war at the time, but the American people ultimately did rally under President Franklin Roosevelt. What many people do not know is that 4 days after that, on December 11, 1941, Adolf Hitler declared war on America. He had already declared his war against non-Aryans and particularly against the Jewish people. And I did, and so I, at the time, I was living in a fraternity on the campus of Ohio University. There were 20 of us living together. We had bull sessions, discussions at night, And the discussion turned to the war. We began to realize the war was going on already. We didn't belong on a university campus. And so en masse, we closed down the fraternity, everybody took off and went to their hometowns. I went to South Orange, New Jersey here. I went to Fort Dix for induction. A few days after I got to Fort Dix, I was called into the commander's office and told to go home for my musical instruments. I played an alto saxophone and clarinet. Home? I'm in the Army. No, we understand you do play, and we do need you in the swing band, the Fort Dix swing band. In that band were the outstanding musicians in America at the time. And so, took the pass, went home, got my instruments, started playing. I had no duties anymore, no KP, I didn't have to peel potatoes, didn't even have to clean around my bed. People took care of all that. That was a wonderful life. And I might have remained doing just that, practice in the morning and then broadcasting at night. But my name came up to be sent out for basic training. The leader of the band, Jack Leonard, who was the predecessor to Frank Sinatra and the Tommy Dorsey Big Swing Band. And Jack says, no, I had your name canceled because we need you here with the band. I said, Jack, no way. My buddies are being shipped out. They're going overseas. They're going to be fighting. I don't want to look back someday and realize that I stepped out of the war early on. No, I think my role is there. I had to argue my way back into it. I said, don't worry, Jack, we're going for basic training, and I'll get back here someday. He said, kid, it's on the back of the book. Kid, you leave here, you're not ever coming back. It was very, very close to being right. I went to basic training and then combat training, a number of posts around America, and then went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and on a big, big, beautiful ship, the RSS Mauritania. I shipped out overseas. We landed in Liverpool, crossed the English Channel, and landed on Omaha Beach. I was placed in the 6th Armored Division in General George Patton's 3rd Army. Fought in 3 major campaigns across Europe. The 3rd campaign was called the Ardennes Campaign. And fought in the Ardennes Forest predominantly in southwestern Belgium. On December 16, 1944, the Germans struck with unrelenting force. Good strategy, their backs were to the wall, and there was total disarray among the American and British forces in the area. At the end of that day, I was reported missing in action. I was not missing. But with that report, there was a radio operator in another division, an American division in that area. And he sent a radio message around to other American divisions and posts in the region. Said, if you see this name again, please let me know. Well, months went by. A telegram had gone off to my parents, letting them know that I was missing in action. If there is further information, the telegram said, we will let you know. Days, weeks go by, there was no further information. And as I learned later, they believed that I was dead. The reality is that I was neither dead nor missing. I'd been on the line for several days. I have a picture here. There are some things that I have here. You might want to examine afterward. I have a picture here of the battle scene. We were in trenches, snow all around us, fighting. There's a person there who looks exactly like me. I cannot certify that it is me, because if somebody took a picture and we were busy fighting, I never knew it. But there it is, and everybody looks at it and says, it's you. I don't know. Whatever. No, I was not missing. I had gone back, and I heard a call for volunteers. I didn't know what. And I was told right at the beginning at Fort Dix, one thing you never do in the Army is volunteer. And so instinctively, something just inside drove me to do that. I found out that the volunteers were needed to reconnoiter the battle zone so that commanders could determine battle strategy. Where were the British? Where were the American lines? Where were the German lines? And so I saw a Jeep in the distance. I ran to the Jeep. The key was in it. I just turned the key on and just took. I turned on the engine. I motioned for others to come. 5 others came over, hopped into the Jeep. We took off, headed down the road. Sometime after our takeoff, we round a curve in the road. And not more than maybe about 10, 15 yards in front of us, suddenly we see it. What I learned later was an 88 millimeter cannon mounted on a tank-like vehicle pointed right at us. For many months after that, and still to today, I do not understand. I wonder why nobody pulled the trigger. If they had, we wouldn't be here today. Just then, the small arms, rifle and machine gun fire start pouring in from our right. We have to find a place from which we can defend ourselves. So I see a shack in the distance. I motion, one of the men, bright, detaches the machine gun, takes it with us. We head for this little shack. One of the men is hit in the back by small arms fire, and he's killed. We get into the shack. There was a big bay window. The man who took the machine gun sets it up in the window. I said, I know he can't last long because there's a lot of small arms fire, a lot of bullets coming over from the other side there. Sure enough, within a couple of minutes, he is killed. There's something that happens in battle that is called a battle readiness. And you do things by instinct. If I stopped to reason, Bob, you get in that window, you're a sitting target, and you're not going to last long either, as he did. But something instinctively drove me to go to the machine gun. I did. And through the rest of the day, I fired. Everything I saw move, I fired. I hit some, killed some, and so forth. Late in the afternoon, we were running out of ammunition. And suddenly I got a cold feeling within me that without the machine gun, we have no way to defend ourselves. What to do? I see in this little shack, there's a trapdoor. Well, if there's a trapdoor, there must be a cellar beneath. And I figured we had 2 wounded, there were 3 able-bodied, 2 wounded, one, and then there was 6 who was killed on the way over. So when I thought we would climb into the cellar and under cover of darkness, we'll come out and we'll try to infiltrate through enemy lines. It didn't work out quite that way. 2 wounded were moaning, and that created sound. The Germans came across the road into the shack. And when they heard those sounds, they knew there was somebody downstairs. They tapped on the door. I pushed it open. There was a sight, some things you remember very, very vividly, and much that happened that many years ago, more than 70 years ago, you completely forget. That was made such an impression on my mind, I still see it today. But pushed the door open, and I saw a ring of black automatic guns, all pointed right down at my face. Behind each of those guns was a white cloaked, camouflaged German soldier. The black gun against the white was dramatic. And they motioned to come up. They took the others away, our other Americans, and for some reason the German sergeant took command of me. He put his rifle barrel in my back, pushed me out the door and across the road. As we approached their battle zone, I saw foxholes all over the place. We were fighting against odds. As I learned later, there were more than 100 of German soldiers. We were 5 fighting them. And we were fortunate enough to be able to hold out through the day until we ran out of ammunition. But just then, as we're approaching their battle zone, artillery, British or American artillery, heavy artillery is coming in, hitting the trees, and we're being bombed. And the German sergeant jumps into his bunker. I try to get in. He puts his rifle at my chest. He said, "Nine." That shelling goes on. I said, "What will you do with me?" I was hoping he would understand a little English. He looks up at me and with almost perfect English responds, "We have to kill you." The order had been issued by higher command that no Allied prisoners were to be taken alive from that point on. "We have to kill you. You have to be very, very fortunate, very lucky to survive under conditions that emerged during that period of the Battle of the Bulge. And I had to kill you. I ran track in school, and I dug in. I figured I have to get out of this somehow. There were foxholes all around me, German soldiers and guards all over the place. There was no way to escape. The only thing I had left now was conversation. We started to talk. And at one point, he says, "This is not your war." I said, "You made it our war." So we're trying to talk over the sound of those shells landing in the trees and on the ground around us. Finally, he reaches down into his pocket. And we're trying to hold this conversation. And I figured he's going to pull out a pistol. He was a non-commissioned officer, and I presumed he had a pistol. He was going to do it. And when he said he had to kill me, I believed he was going to do it with a pistol. Instead, he pulls out a wallet. I'm trying to envision the scene. There's shelling going on all over. Now this conversation, and he pulls out this wallet. And he looks down. Oh, he showed me the picture. He has a son, a daughter. The son is a teenager. Looks not much younger than I. And he looks up at me, he looks down again. Looks up and looks down. He then says, "For you, the war is over." And I figured again, fire his gun. No, I always assumed, this never came up in our conversation, I always assumed that he looked at the pictures and he looked at me. I was young. I had just turned 20, very young. And perhaps he thought, there, for the grace of, that could be my son standing there. And the tone, his voice, from the guttural native tongue of the German language, suddenly the tone of the discussion changed in the English. And I believe at that point, he did decide that he was not going to kill me as he was supposed to do. And he did plan to send me back to a prisoner of war camp. 2 guards came over, took me away, and we started to march. Along the way, a German officer stops them, and there's a conversation. They then route in another direction. We're plodding through the snow, and suddenly I come to a mass of other soldiers. I see some American uniforms, and then I see other uniforms that are very, very different. As I learned later, they were captives of the Germans from the Eastern European countries and from the Soviet Union. We were thrown together. I was told, sit down. And then they motioned, get up. The signals came usually at the end of a rifle. Do this, do that, And 2 German guards came over to me, and one in front of me pulled off my gloves. The other pushed my coat back. The one behind me pulled off the coat. So my winter garments, gloves and winter coat, were taken away. We're then ordered march. of a forced march. I had no idea where I was, what I was, but I knew, I sensed there was something. I was not going to a war camp, obviously. Darkness descends, and we're told to lie down. Always with that rifle barrel pointing down, down. And they didn't let us lie next to one another because we could share some body heat. No, we had to lie in a line. We lie down on snow and ice. I learned later the temperature at the time ranged between 0 and 5 degrees Fahrenheit. On that snow and ice, without a winter coat, no gloves. That's where I lie down every night for 82 out of the next 90 nights. I was deteriorating. As the days wore on, I felt deterioration in the body. We were getting virtually no food. A few crumbs, scraps of dark brown bread, perhaps in the morning, and maybe sometime during the day. We would get a can of hot water, and sometimes they put a little piece of potato in the bottom. When I say can, it wasn't a canteen or anything that would be reasonable to drink from. It was an old can, like a Campbell's soup can. And that was it. We had to subsist on that. Bodies deteriorated. Some men were already turning very sick. I will tell you, some died. Not too long afterward, from a combination of malnutrition and exposure to the elements. And as the days wore on, nights were bitter. I thought I could only think of death during that time. But there was one resource that I could still turn to, and that was the emotions. Physically, I knew my body was deteriorating. Every forced march was very difficult. My legs and feet got heavier, and it was very difficult to walk. But I lie there at night, and I thought of, what could I think? I thought of food. Strangest thing, when you're deprived so much from food, it becomes very, very attractive. I thought of all the wonderful dishes my mother used to make. And the reality occurred to me, someday I'm going to get out of this. Either the war will end, or maybe I can escape. Those foods became so real at night. I could see them, I could taste them, I could smell them. And that emotionally kept me balanced and able to continue. Months later, while hospitalized, I asked a nurse to bring me a little, something I could write on. She brought me this little brown book, and I printed, my writing was so bad, my handwriting, I wrote left-handed, so I printed every food out in here. The 84 foods printed in this little brown book. And those are the foods that sustained me emotionally during that period. If you go to the other part of the book, I detailed during my hospital stage later, when the doctors reported every day, or he wrote on their charts, the nurses told me what the doctors discovered. I had 26 different illnesses, fevers, injuries, and they're all recorded in this, my prized little brown book. The Allies, British and American forces, were driving the Germans back. They had to move us faster. Before that, I should tell you, as slave laborers, the work we were assigned to do was to rebuild the railroads that were bombed by British and American planes. At night, we had to carry heavy railroad tracks on our shoulders, sometimes miles. Some men did not make it. They dropped out along the way. They were either pushed off to the side of the road or they were shot. And there were no choices. You had to make that. You had to do it. Bones were beginning to protrude in my shoulders. And that was very, very tough. We took those tracks from one town sometime to another, and then we had to put them in place. There were big craters, of course, from the bombs. We had to refill those craters and then lay out the tracks. There were some smart prisoners with me. We were not allowed to talk to one another. We were not even able to look face to face with one another. Out of the corner of my eyes, I could see what some of them were doing. When they put those layers of dirt in, it was the way that they put them in, so that you knew that any heavy railroad car going over that was going to descend. And some men knew what to do with the tracks. They didn't quite have the meat, or they didn't put pins in the right place. The inspections were conducted by the German guards. They obviously didn't know a lot about railroads. We were successful in sabotaging those railroads. So the only delight that we had during all this period was the realization that no German trains carrying supplies to the troops that we were fighting, those trains wouldn't get through. That went on for some time, and then again, as I started to mention, the American and British troops were driving the Germans back. They had to move us faster, and there were cattle cars. You probably have seen, some of you may have seen actual cars on display. These railroad cars that took the Jews and others to the concentration camps. They pushed us into those cars. When I say push, they pushed with the rifle barrels again in the back. Those cars should have held 40 humans sitting. I estimated sometime as we were there, that were between 75 and 80 of us, bodies stacked against bodies. Those who tried to sit down had bodies tumbling over them. Each morning, these cars had no lights, no windows. Each morning, the big door swung open. They threw in crusts of bread. We scrambled for little bread there was. And we had become pretty much like a pack of animals. Didn't care about one another, just trying to get a little of that bread and survive somehow. Many men became very ill. Some died while we were in that railroad car. Some went out of their minds. We had no toilet facilities. We had to use our helmets. The air was putrid. That went on for 6 days and nights. Many died, as I said, many died. At the end of that period, the big door swung open, they pulled us out, put us into a forced march. I knew at that point I could not continue. My right foot had been had turned black. And I knew that it would run up. I didn't know it was black because I could see it, but as we learned later, it did. Gangrene had begun to set in. We were on a forced march again, trying to get us to moving into territory away from the Allied forces that were charging down on us. I knew that I had to escape. The way the guards were positioned, I figured that if we rounded a curve, it would be a point at which we would not be visible to these guards. There were 2 American soldiers nearby. I tried to give them some hand signals that went. And this meaning we will move out of here somehow. We got to that point, we did. I gave the signals to the other 2. We did. We did together, 3 of us, threw ourselves over a hedgerow. I believe that the soldiers behind us closed ranks. Otherwise, the German guards would have come back, seeing these openings, and they would have discovered us. We were now free. We threw our bodies over a hedgerow. We crawled back into what turned out to be a lovely little German village, it was called Reichenbach. As we got close to that little village, here we were escaped, we were free. We got close to that village, and I heard the sounds that we heard on the battlefield. And then, as we got closer, I saw German tanks and German soldiers. We had escaped to a German staging area. If seen, we'd be shot immediately. We crawled through back alleys. In the distance, I saw a little white house, a row of houses, and one was a little white one. Something instinctive again hit me, and I told the other two, "That's a safe house." "How do you know?" I said, "I don't know, but I know." And so we crawled through the alleyways, and we got to that house. I knocked on the door. An elderly man comes to the door. He looks at me, looks me up and down. We were filthy, torn clothes. My hair was shaved. We contracted lice also. I don't know why. We were in a cold territory of lice, little things that crawl around your body. They usually are in warmer climates. But anyway, I had lice all over my head. The only thing the Germans did for me during that entire period was to shave my head because of the lice. They didn't cover the lice that were around my belt area because that's what lice did. So that was another enemy we had to fight during that time. But this elderly man looks at I have a thin jacket. I didn't have a coat during that time. And he looks at the jacket, he sees the U.S. emblem on that jacket. And he smiles. He comes out on the porch, looks to see if there are any soldiers around. If they are caught with us, they will be shot along with us. They will be shot as traitors. But nevertheless, he sees no soldiers, pulls us in. It turns out, again, luck. He speaks English. His wife speaks English. She runs to the kitchen to bring out some food. She saw what we looked like. We were emaciated. Brings us some food. Hot soup, piece of meat in it. I couldn't eat the meat, couldn't take anything down. We hadn't had food in quite some time. I was able to get the soup down. It was delirious with joy and comfort for a few moments with the taste of that soup. Why did they risk their lives? It turns out, good fortune against strength. It turns out that years earlier, they had been to America. They had gone to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They had either a family or friends there. They had very, very strong, positive feelings about America and Americans. And they were willing to risk their lives by taking us in. They couldn't keep us there, but they did tell us. In fact, they wrote out a map, alleyways you can go through, and you can get to a barn nearby. Now, we knew we were not far from American troops because we heard the shelling going on in the near distance. And so we did crawl to that barn. We ascended into the upper levels late in hay, and we stayed that way maybe 2 or 3 days. Don't recall exactly. One night, we heard a lot of scurrying around, and we recognized the next day that the Germans had moved their forces out of there, and obviously were in retreat. Well, they were. The Allied forces must be nearby. And sure enough, I'm looking at a little crack in the wood, down an alleyway, and I see some soldiers go by. The helmets they're not German helmets. They look like ours. Still not sure. I tell the other two, I think our American forces are here. They're not sure either. And then a vehicle goes by. It's a Jeep. And on the Jeep, on the front of the Jeep is that white star. And I recognize these are Americans. We roll out of the hayloft, roll down. I'm somewhat delirious at that point, and probably not too far from death. So I'm barely able to roll down the alleyway. They try to put food in this, they try to give me chocolate and everything. I gagged on everything. Of could not eat anything at all. They discovered that I had my scarf. The only winter garment I had when I threw my shoe away was a scarf. I had wrapped that around my right foot. And they saw the scarf, so they figured there must be something under the, took the scarf off and saw that what my foot looked like. They took me to a field hospital. Any of you who have seen the program MASH on television, a field hospital, very, very much like that. Doctors operating under severe conditions, very difficult conditions, but nevertheless, they did cut flesh away from my right foot, and that probably saved my leg. From that point on, I'm blank. I know I was transported to the First General Hospital in Liège, Belgium. When I got there, I was reported as alive and hospitalized in Liège, Belgium. I remember I mentioned that there was a radio man, an American radio man, who had issued a request earlier, if you see this name again, please let me know. So my name appeared on a list that I was alive and hospitalized in Belgium. The information came to that person. He sat down that night and typed out, radio operator said, he was company clerk too, he had a typewriter. He typed out a letter, found out where my parents lived, or knew where my parents lived, and typed a letter to my parents. Got it in the mail very, very quickly. My parents received this letter telling them that the son they thought was dead really arrived. The person who wrote that letter, it was signed. This is the original letter. It was on white paper, I believe it was turned brown, and there's sort of cracks in the page itself. It's dated Germany, April 26, 1945. My parents get that letter, and they see that it is signed, Lester. I had an older brother, 8 years older than I. His name was Lester. He cared for me. My father worked nights. 8 years older than me. He was able to care for me from birth through my early teen years. It was my own brother who sent that message around, who initiated that search. And my parents then received that letter from their older brother telling them that your younger son, Bobby, he's alive. I don't have to tell you the joy that my parents enjoyed after that. But I then was sent, again, I don't know how, what means they did, but I ended up in the First General Hospital in Paris, France, and then put on a hospital plane back to America. We landed in an airfield in Upper New York State. I was taken to Halloran General Hospital on Staten Island. I spent 1 month in the two hospitals in Europe, and 9 months more at the Halloran General Hospital in Staten Island. I was critical at the time. I was put in a private room. My parents came immediately to see me. They pushed the door open, and they look in, they see there's somebody there, and they close the door and walk on. They didn't realize it was me. I was so emaciated at the time. Facial expressions were very, very different. Cheeks drawn in. And so they didn't recognize me. Other family members, relatives came by, and they all did the same thing. Nobody recognized who I was. But the doctors worked feverishly, and they discovered the ailments that I had. They were treated. One thing they couldn't do, though, they couldn't put any weight on me. I had weighed 155 pounds when I went into combat. I now weighed 89 pounds. You've seen pictures of the atrocity cases, concentration camp internees, and that's what I looked like, 89 pounds. So obviously, they just didn't recognize me. So the doctors were curing some of those illnesses, but they couldn't put any weight on. In comes Jenny Grossinger. Do any of you know about Grossingers in upper New York State?
Yes.
You know, the Catskill Mountains in New York State, the greatest resort area, certainly in the East, even with the Atlantic coast cities. And so Jenny Grosser comes to the hospital, and she said, she offers, just like many Americans did, everybody wanted some role for all the wonderful heroes coming back. And Jenny Grosser says, I want you to send some of these young men and women to Grossinger's, to our place. We'll care for them, and we'll help give them some feelings of recovery, joy. Well, the doctors, again, they couldn't put any weight on it, but they agreed. The chaplain at the hospital urged the doctors, send this boy there. I think Jenny Grosser can do some good for him. And sure enough, they assigned one of the people from the hospital to be my guard, whatever. They took me there, and it was a wonderful week. Carla Grossinger, Jenny's daughter, really took control of me. She had me write an article for the Grossinger Tattler. I was really part of the scene there. It was so nice. I did come back from gorging. I still couldn't gorge, but I could take food. And I did come back. They put me on a scale. I actually gained some weight. Then the chaplain says, you know, doctors, Jenny Grosser can do more for this boy than all your pills and all your skills and all that. He's going back for another week. He's got an extra week at Grosser. While lying in the hospital, again, those 10 months, there were a lot of sleepless nights. When I was able, they moved me out of the private room and onto the ward. And during those sleepless nights, I relived battle scenes, but also I was trying to figure out, what do I do with the rest of my life? I still had to go back to school, the business, and try to conduct a decent life. Something was nagging at me. And then finally, I realized what that was. The recognition that I should have been dead. And when I speak to adult audiences, almost invariably, somebody will say, it's a miracle that you're standing here and talking with us because you should have been dead many times. And that's true. But I survived. And I always felt there had to be a reason why I did survive. And so reasoning, a compulsion set within my framework somewhere, my emotions, that the fact that you survive means that you should. You're going to spend the rest of your life helping others discover things about themselves. Humanitarian work. And that's what really urged me and did force me, and well, didn't have to force very hard, but did get me to assume a role in later life, as we mentioned at the beginning of our session, and Shirley and I did become a partnership in business when I decided I had been at NBC, National Broadcasting Company. I was a vice president of one of their subsidiary companies. It was a nice life in Rockefeller Center in New York, wonderful. But And then I went to an electrical equipment manufacturer, became marketing, a vice president, did some wonderful things with writing, and everybody said, go be a consultant. So young Jewish boys liked the idea of becoming a consultant. I don't know what I was going to consult with, and I wrote the presidents of major companies. You could get the companies at that time and write to the president. That was before the conglomerates began to take shape. And I wrote to president of companies. And I wanted to be a consultant for them. The letter was good enough to get me an entree to all these companies. First one I went to said, you can't become a consultant for our company. You'd have to learn all about, this was an insurance company, all about the insurance industry. You don't know anything about it. However, can you teach our people to write the way you write? That letter that got to him, that caused him to invite me in, attracted him. I said, again, something I learned in combat. This is battle readiness. And there are times when you can deliberate, and there are other times when you must operate on the spot. And so instinctively, when he said, can you train our people to do what you do? And I said, yes. Just give me 3 months. He did, and I spent the next 3 months conceiving, developing courses in communication skills, which at that time, it was 1969, at that time, communication skills were very, very important in American industry. Technical information had to be imparted to non-technical people, sales letters had to go out and all that. And so, started to build a business. My first customer didn't start small. The first customer was AT&T. So it went on from that point on, and that was where Shirley joined me, and we became a team, and then built a business, and built a couple of small businesses that turned out to be very, very successful. And ultimately, we ended up here. As was mentioned at the very beginning, Shirley and I had become a team, worked together. Probably one of the best things that we ever did was, I guess, lead a group of our founding members of this congregation into forming a new congregation. And in the process of doing that, we learned about Reconstructionist Judaism, Mordecai Kaplan's. Somebody mentioned, we're sitting around meetings in people's homes. We conducted our own service, and we had to decide. We wanted to become Reform, Conservative. And somebody mentioned the writings of Mordecai Kaplan. They mentioned Reconstructionism. We all looked at one another. We had no idea what it was at that time. But when they mentioned that the person who created the system, the methodology, the thinking that led to Reconstructionist movement, Mordecai Kaplan. So we started to read. We read about it. The more we read, the more it appealed to us. And that is what we became as a congregation. And let me conclude my remarks by just saying that when we started there, it was like a little family operation. And I was always feeling a family. But as we have grown, and as the leadership of our congregation has evolved over the years, and I see some sitting right out here today. Amy, you were one of them, of course. And as a matter of fact, just one quick aside. On our 10th anniversary, we had a program in honor of 10 years of being. And I remember Amy was president. Amy Klein was president at that time. And Amy got up, addressing our membership, and saying, and then she looked over at me, and she says, Bob, what were you thinking? You had no money, you had no building, you had no rabbi. What were you thinking? And that was a stage in our growth and our development. No, we we were thinking of instinct, and then the idea of becoming Reconstructionist Jews, and that's what we became. But we were all family, and the way this congregation has grown with the leadership that so many of you have become in it, we retain that same feeling. And I must tell you, as I conclude, I speak to a lot of organizations, have many in the last few months in particular, and some big ones coming ahead. I'll be speaking at Fort Dix to a large military group in the very near future, and some other programs too. But there's nothing like coming home. And I look at, normally when I look at an audience, there are many faces, but none of them familiar. And here today, so many familiar to me, original, newer members and all. And I must tell you that this is, of all the speaking engagements I've had, none has ever been warmer or touched me more emotionally than just being here with you today. So today, as I conclude, as I was turning, one further incident, and I think many of you know that I've written this life experience. And surely, when I was turning 90, my 93rd birthday, it was Shirley who said, "Bob, historians have told you you were the only surviving American soldier, survivor of atrocities, Nazi atrocities, forced upon American soldiers. There's nobody here, the story has never been told. It's a significant part of the Battle of the Bulge, World War II history, and particularly as a Jewish soldier, you've got to tell that story." We had spent a weekend, I think, did I mention we spent a weekend alone with Elie Wiesel? No, we had, and this was the impetus for that. Shirley and I spent a weekend alone with Elie Wiesel at the President's Guest House in Athens, Ohio University. A weekend totally alone. His mission, you know, was to never forget. He was the voice, he was the image, he was the survivor of the Holocaust. And this was 2 years after Elie Wiesel had won the Nobel Peace Prize. And here we are alone with this inspirational force. And that had such an impact upon me that Shirley reminded me of that event, and that you've got to do something. And it was her guidance, really, that drove me to do this. And the objective became, and my mission became, it was shortly after that I also joined forces with the Holocaust Council of Metro West New Jersey and started speaking. And, well, I won't be, at 95, I don't think I'll be speaking a long time after this. But this book has the whole story and memories of the Holocaust and the urge, particularly to young people, to never ever forget, but to be the voices of reason in the future. And whenever again on the scene you see the emergence of a force introduced by Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, you'll recognize it. And your voice, your memory, you remember things that you heard here and that you've read about the Holocaust. And you will be a voice of reason and talk to people to alert them, to make sure that something like this can never happen again. And with that, if there are any questions, I'll be glad to respond. excuse me, but
I know,
My
I
reading.
know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh,
Okay.
you're fine.
Did your German captors know that you were Jewish? On my, I went into battle, you know, at Fort Dix, when I had my first staging area. At Fort Dix, I was given my dog tags. There was a J on the bottom. Some had a J, some had an H for Hebrew. I added to the dog tags a Magen David, a Star of David, can't see, and a miniature mezuzah. I was young, I was defiant. And one thing I was not going to do, I knew, of course we knew all about the murder that was going on of ultimately 6 million Jews. And so I went in and decided I was not going to hide my Jewishness. There had been I don't know if it was an order or not, but those who were Jewish were told, if you're captured, destroy your dog tags. I did not. As a prisoner, had I gone to a prisoner of war camp, they would have probably interrogated me, asked me to open my shirt. They would have seen the dog tags. They certainly would have recognized the Jewish star. And I keep thinking back, could I have had any worse treatment? Probably not. So it would not have made any difference. And so throughout all that time, I remained with my dog tags, my Jewish star, and my miniature mezuzah.
My confirmation class has some questions for you.
Thank you.
Do you, what happened to the two other prisoners who you escaped with?
Let me tell you, I make a distinction in what happened during the early period of my military experience. We were buddies. That's when I decided, when I saw my buddies leaving, that I did not want to play music in the band and I wanted to go with them. We had that kind of relationship. When we got into combat, that was true also. Once we became slave laborers, the only instinct, or the primary instinct, was to remain alive. We didn't really have buddy systems. Each person, recognizing that death loomed ahead, was so concerned with himself that that's what he lived for. There was only one soldier that I really became close to, and he was a farmer in Rushville, Indiana. His name was Myron Barringer. One of the illnesses I contracted was undulant fever. It was a little-known disease, very, very rare, and in many cases fatal. It afflicted me terribly. Several years later, when an attack occurred and I was hospitalized, a doctor, the most unusual doctor, asked me, he said, I want you to tell me everything that happened to you in the war. I spent hours and hours to him. I came to a place where we were locked in a barn for one night, and this Myron Barringer yelled to me, Bob, come over here, lie down. Lie down? Where? Under this cow. Under a cow? He milked fresh milk from the cow's udder into my mouth. This doctor discovered that,
this doctor at an isolation hospital in Belleville, New Jersey, spent the time that I find very, very rare among doctors. They don't have the time to do it. But he was determined. He was going to find out what this ailment was. And he did. He questioned. And he came, and then when I told him about that scene in the barn, he then said, I know what you have. You have undulant fever. And he said, it's a Mediterranean disease. And I said, doctor, I was not in the Mediterranean. He says, but, brilliant doctor, the great, great fortune of having one doctor, maybe one out of goodness knows thousands of doctors, who would have known of an illness called undulant fever. And then he treated, I was treated for that, and I was cured. But the question was, did I remain close to him? He was the only one. Again, we didn't make close associations because we were struggling for our own lives. But with Myron, I did, because every Christmas, I got a Christmas card from Myron, and the message was always the same. Dear Bob, things sure aren't like they used to be. And then finally, after, I don't know, about 25 years, the letter comes and I see, and the Christmas greeting comes, and the writing is different. Myron had died. He was the only one that I really came that close to, and only because he created that situation with the milking of the cow. But the others, again, were interested in their own lives, and I was interested in just trying to sustain my own. So we never built any strong, lasting friendships. Any other questions?
How have all of these war experiences changed you emotionally?
When I look back, I say, despite all that I went through, I do the same things today that I did then. Obviously, older, not able to do some of those things. One of the things that I did at the end of every day, as a teenager, at night, before dozing off, I always checked inventory. What was today like? What did I achieve today? In 3 categories. 1, academic in school. What happened in school today? 2, athletics. 3, I think it was social life. And I went through an inventory before I could fall asleep. I went through the war, and I would tell you that I don't do it as organized as I used to do it. But even today, I feel the same thing. Each day should be something. You should have done something significant for the day. And I do think about that during the pre-sleep period each night, and it has stayed with me. And in that process, so I think of I don't do it as organized, but how did the day go and what lies ahead for tomorrow? So last night I was thinking about what I was going to do here today, and I'm so delighted to have been able to talk with you here today.
What do the medals on your army jacket mean?
Oh, they mean a lot of toil and danger, things like that. I won't go through. You'll see the ribbon on your left shows battle stars for the battles in. Probably the most significant is the Purple Heart. If you look in the Purple Heart, of course, recognize injury or death to a soldier. But if you look further, there's a blue ribbon and you'll see an oak leaf cluster, an oak leaf cluster on it. That means that I got a second Purple Heart for injuries. And that's the most significant. Others are for other purposes, good conduct, marksmanship, etc. But the one that means the most to me, again, is the Purple Heart, and you have to really sacrifice to earn that. Now that,
Of the people that you were forced to work with, do you know how many survived? Of the people you were forced to work with, like building the railroads, do you know how many survived?
I have no idea, because we were not able to develop connections or associations. We were just a mass of humanity. We were men who had bodies, arms, and hands. You worked only, and you lived only as long as you were able to work. And I don't recall that any strong emotions remained afterward. But again, that was what life was. We were so, we had to work. I should tell you that there were beatings. I often got rifle barrels across my back, and that was sometimes not doing as much as I should have been doing. Whatever. But I don't know. Have I answered your question? If not, tell me.
No, you have.
Oh, I just thought I may have been drifting a little. Yeah.
What made you persist and work through the pain in the hospital?
Did I what?
What made you persist and work through the pain in the hospital?
Working with pain?
What made you persist and
Like-
work through the pain in the hospital?
What made you not give up in the hospital? Like to survive?
How did you survive in the hospital? Get through it.
There were different stages in the hospital, of course. Surviving, when I was in the private room, I was in a very, very serious condition, and I survived, barely cognizant of what I was going through during that period. When I got out onto the ward, then conditions changed. I became part of humanity again. There were other soldiers around, and we all wanted to share our experiences. They wanted, because I was an atrocity case, it was unique. I was a slave laborer, Nazi atrocities, and so the men around me, in beds around me, had lots and lots of questions because they had no idea what that was like. And so, in a way, we built connections that way. And I learned about some of the experiences that they had gone through in battle. And they learned about something that they knew nothing about, and that was what it was like to be a slave laborer in Nazi Germany. So in a sense, that was a learning experience. And one of the people near me, his name was Harry, and his wife was at the hospital every day. Harry was suffering from, what's the blood disease, a fatal blood disease?
Leukemia.
Who?
Leukemia?
Leukemia. And Harry was afflicted with leukemia. He was such a wonderful man, and we were side by side in beds. His wife came to the hospital every day, and this was back. This is now 60, 70 years ago. And his wife said, "Just got some good news. The doctors, the researchers are finding a cure for leukemia." And she was so elated. Not long after one of those conversations with her, Harry died. The cure for leukemia, I'm not sure it even exists. A total cure, an immediate cure for leukemia exists. But it took generations for what she expected and hoped would happen to Harry. And it was a sad loss for me, of course, for her, because he was such a fine, fine man. I hated to see him go. Any other?
I have a question. I'm sorry. So first of all, I just want to let everybody know, get the book. You know, Debbie did a great thing for our book group and bought them all for us and distributed them, which was great. It's an easy read, and it's really powerful. So I encourage everybody to get the book. Couple things in the book that you didn't mention that I was curious about. You mentioned twice that you tried on your uniform and it didn't fit. Was it too big or too small?
Too tight.
But you were 155 pounds, right?
They gave me that uniform when I left the hospital. Now, they had done some wonders to keep me alive.
Okay.
But
I thought it was the first one you had
Jenny
when you
Grocer
first
put some weight on, but she didn't bring me back to the original weight. And so, so I tried that on. And you'll see a picture in the book, of course, with my my grandson wearing this jacket.
And then the second question I had, I'm curious, a lot of people have done their own journeys back to concentration camps to see. Did you ever go back to that farmhouse, that barn, or trace your steps, or do anything like that?
I went back to the area in France overlooking Omaha Beach. I wanted to see again. And in a sense we lived. I don't know why I was attracted to the idea of reliving what was it like that day when we crossed the English Channel and landed with combat ready. I want to go back there. And it was like delusionary. When we were back there, we stood up above the beach. And I remember, of course, with the landing and all the ships that were part of the landing corps. And what did I see? Such a different scene. Looked down, and there was a beach, and there were people in bathing suits, umbrellas, and oh my gosh, how could they do that? In my mind, this was sacred territory. And then I looked further off into the waters. And if any of you have ever been back to the northern coast of France, Brittany, you would see still today big remnants of the ships that transported the troops over there. And they're still sticking up today. And they will probably remain there, goodness knows, forever, as a remembrance of what happened on D-Day in this war. So it was good. I did want to go back to visit the family, the older people. And by the time I was able to do that, I realized, first of all, finding that little town would not be easy, but I probably could find it. Finding the house they lived on would be very, very difficult. But maybe I still wanted it. And then suddenly it occurred to me, they were old people when I was there in the war. And now, decades later, they're not going to be there. So I never did really go back there.
Well, I'll be the one to say it.